It's not showing live, it's just loading. Yes, they're live now. Thank God. Good afternoon, everyone. We are doing this session at a very different time. As you know, we usually do our sessions in the evening, but Miss Liz Keable is available this time, so we made a little shift. Our most of the session will be at the same time, in the evening hours because everyone is available that time. So let's get started. Without further ado, I'll introduce myself. Most of you know me. My name is Aslaha Farheen, and I'm founder director of Learners Tribe International School, which is an online K5 international school. If you ask me what is K5, so this is a school for grade nursery to grade 5. It is a complete online school. And I'm very delighted to share that Ms. Liz Keable is our success coach and advisory board member at Learners Tribe International School. Liz needs no introduction. She is into the educational field for many, many years, more than 3 decades. So I should go ahead now and hand it over to Liz. So, Liz, the floor is all yours. Please introduce yourself and for those who don't know you, and then we can get ahead with our conversation.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was a teacher in high school for many years. I taught science, became really interested in the way that children learn rather than the actual subject I was teaching, and went on to be an advisory teacher in schools for gifted and talented education and how to include as many youngsters as possible in the learning and helping teachers to see more effective ways of engaging students in the learning. More recently, I have worked with children with behavioural difficulties to try and help them engage better with education. And I'm now a success coach working in schools, supporting youngsters who have difficulty accessing the learning for some reason or another. Whatever the difficulty is, it doesn't matter. And then the very recent thing is that I've started training school staff to do what I do to increase the capacity within schools for supporting particularly struggling and vulnerable students.
That's great, Liz. I know how much you're helping little learners or young learners in achieving what they wish to. So you are actually a catalyst in their learning journey. If I, define you in the chemistry language, which I am, I love doing that. So in the last session, we discussed about the cognitive development in early years. We discussed about the role of teachers, parents. What are the factors that are responsible for cognitive development, and what are the factors that hinders cognitive development? We also discussed about the role of schools. School play a major role because school is the ecosystem where such development majorly happen. This is what we believe. We don't know whether it is right or wrong, but yes, school is the place which is meant for learning. So we discussed about the role of school. Then we discussed about the role of parents as well. And today we have come up with a related topic, and now we are discussing about best ways to learn in elementary years. I'll again, make it clear to you. Elementary years are usually the years which are from nursery to grade 5, if you call it reception, to grade 5. So your primary years and your early years comes under elementary years. So Liz is going to enlighten us about what are the best ways to learn in elementary years. So my first question to you, Liz, is how does the brain work or develop during the elementary school year age? So just let us know about it.
Okay, yeah. Last time we looked at the natural way in which children soak up information from around them. We call that primary learning because it's our first way of learning, as opposed to the secondary way of learning that requires conscious effort once we get into school. But a child is born with a basic neural network, and that grows very rapidly. It's important to the survival of the child that that happens, because they need to learn very quickly about their environment. And that's what the 5 senses are for. We use them all throughout life to continually assess our surroundings, and it's mainly to keep us safe. But every time a child or an adult of any age receives a new piece of information, through those 5 senses, then new connections are being made in the brain. The brain cells join up and they create connections to hold that new piece of information. And we used to think that was only true when we were young, but now we know that that happens at any age. However old you are, your brain will continue to make new connections every time you learn something new. But what's interesting is that the brain strives to store new information alongside other information that's already in there that is similar or related. So it means that when we learn something, it not only increases the physical size of our neural network, but we also are able to mentally link things together, the new knowledge with the old, because of the way the brain stores it. It is the brain that makes sense of everything. We call the senses, but it's the brain that's actually making sense. But it is well protected inside our skulls, so the information has to get in there somehow. And that's what the 5 senses are for. They kind of link that outside world that we live in with our internal world, which is where we exist as an individual. And that flow of information is going in all the time, and we're often not aware of it, but there's a constant flow to the brain of information. Unfortunately, we don't have to consciously process all of that. Much of it is sent directly to the subconscious brain. And that has even more significance for young children. For adults, the brain uses a whole range of different wavelengths for working. Most common of them is beta waves. Those are the waves we use for everyday functioning of the brain. But if we start to daydream or get a bit dozy, or we're watching TV and we're switched off, as it were, then the brain changes to use alpha waves, which is where we allow information to just kind of wash over us. And those waves are actually particularly creative. They support creativity. So a lot of people say that they have their best ideas while they're half asleep or while they're daydreaming. But what's really interesting here from a child development point of view is that the brains of children under 7 are functioning almost entirely in those alpha waves. Now, we know that children are particularly imaginative and creative, particularly in the early years, but more significantly, they are continuously downloading information from their environment without asking any questions about it, without reasoning on where that information is coming from, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. They are just downloading it. And the most important aspect of all of this is that a child's self-concept is formed during that time of that constant download. And the way they view themselves is affected for the rest of their lives by what they see and hear and how they were treated by others, even before they ever get to school. So all of that kind of sounds complicated, but it's there to prevent us feeling overwhelmed and to give us a support system for making decisions later on in life. So it kind of creates a database that we can work with, and we don't have to keep relearning stuff because it's all kind of stored in that subconscious. The problem with that is that if part of that stored information is a poor self-concept, where a young person feels they're not capable of learning, then it requires a lot of work to help them change that mindset. And as teachers, we can help modify that mindset a bit to help them to believe more in themselves and in their own ability to learn. And every time a child learns anything, whether it's by their own primary experience where they're soaking information up or they're being taught in secondary mode in school, their brain will continue to expand. What's really important is that the brain recognizes the new information as something that's new or novel, because that's when it will pay attention to it. We talked last time about the importance of the need to get a child's attention and keep it as part of their cognitive development. And another thing that has an impact on the brain is the need for repetition in secondary learning, particularly because that strengthens the existing neural pathways. Do you remember we said last time that primary learning involves having an experience, which is an effortless way to learn, and that forms stronger neural pathways because the person is involved, they're having an experience. But it's that secondary learning where we need the repetition to strengthen the neural pathways, because it's not quite so effective in creating those memory traces that we need. An interesting thing about those pathways is that when we repeat something, the brain starts to recognize that that piece of information is important. And when it does that, it realizes it's something that needs to be remembered and will coat it in a substance called myelin, which creates a permanent memory. It acts a bit like the rubber wiring around the outside of an electrical wire, and it makes the messaging faster. We can remember things quicker, and it makes the memory permanent. So all of that brain development needs to be kept in mind, particularly when teaching at elementary level.
Thank you so much, Liz. There's a lot to learn about that. And, as Liz said, that nothing is impossible. Brain is an alive organ which keep on expanding. The more we want, the more we can expand it. So we need to have a possibilitarian mindset instead of, seeing things as difficulties. We need to find ways to overcome it. So that signal also goes to brain, and brain also starts seeing things from a different angle. So what I was learning, I think around 2 months back, about the growth mindset, because I was too keen to implement it in my school, and we did it to a bit. I shared in last sessions also, and that actually made a difference. Because as Liz said, if students are believing that they can't do, it means they're sending this signal to brain, which is making it conditioned that they can't do that. So basically, it's all about how we train our mindset to think differently. So Liz, parents play a very important role in building this mindset or changing this mindset or helping the learners to learn in better ways. So what advices do you have for parents for supporting learners to develop better ways of learning in the elementary years, specifically for elementary year parents, what they should be doing?
Yeah, I think it's important that parents remember what we just said about the way that younger children are downloading everything from their surroundings, because that's mainly about the home environment, which is hopefully where they feel more relaxed, and they're more likely to be using those alpha waves rather than the beta waves that are required to learn in school. So the really important thing is to provide a loving environment at home that helps your child feel good about themselves. What we want them to have is a healthy self-concept, and how a child views themselves and their abilities has a real impact on how well they do in school. So parents have a really big influence in that area. It's important to create that environment that gives them a good self-concept. As we mentioned last time as well, another really important thing to do is to provide lots of different positive experiences. Remember, we said last time that that's important for the exploration side of cognitive development. And I think it's so important that I just want to tell you about a famous experiment that led to a greater understanding of how learning takes place. There was a scientist called Marion Diamond who set up an experiment with 3 different cages of rats. So forgive me if you don't like rats, but that's what they used to do in those days. She had one cage of rats that were had lots and lots of toys in it. They had tunnels and ladders and levels and toys for the rats to play with, so they could have a lot of fun and stay occupied. Then she had another cage of rats in the middle that were facing that cage, so they could see all the fun that the other rats were having. And then there was a third cage of rats faced the other way, so they couldn't see what was going on. And what they predicted was that the rats in the cage that were having all the fun would live longer and would be healthier while they were alive, and that the rats in the cage on the other end would die early and wouldn't be very healthy. Now they were right; that was correct. But what surprised them was what happened in the middle cage, because they had expected that they would have kind of a middling health span and a middling lifespan. And it surprised them to find that actually those rats did no better than the rats in the cage on the end. They all died early and they were all unhealthy. So they realized that just being able to see the fun in the other cage didn't make any difference at all to the lifespan of the rats. So what Marion Diamond did next is she actually had a piece of Einstein's brain. In those days, you could get hold of slices of his brain. And she compared the rats' brains with Einstein's brain. And what she found was that the rats who had been in the cage where they'd had all the fun and lots of occupation had increased a huge number of glial cells in the brain. And glial cells are supporting the neurons or the brain cells to do their work. So the more glial cells you have, the more your brain is supported and the more learning you're able to do at a faster pace, etc. And what she found was that was what Einstein's brain had, was a lot of extra glial cells. And that was why he was so intelligent. So what we learned from that whole experiment was how important it is to have experiences for brain development. That's why those rats developed those extra glial cells, was because they were totally involved all the time in activity. So it means being involved and not just watching other people do things. So I think it's important for parents to remember that that kind of memorable physical experience is not that common in a traditional school. So don't presume that your child is getting everything they need from being in a school. So keep providing opportunities for experiencing new things outside of school, and you will be supporting, without actually teaching them anything, you will be supporting their ability to learn in school, because you'll be helping to develop their brain in the process. Also, it's really important that you help your children to see challenge as a natural part of learning. A challenge only feels that way because it's beyond our current understanding. So that feeling of being challenged means there's now an opportunity to learn something new. That's what learning is. So it's important for parents to model that idea of being excited by a challenge, being excited by a new idea, and having that kind of desire to find out more. So you can talk to your children by saying, oh, I wonder if, or I wonder what, and then going, oh, let's find out, and being excited by that learning process, so that they see you doing that. Another thing would be to encourage making mistakes, because that is how the brain is designed to work. We try something, it doesn't work, so we try a different way, that doesn't work, so we try it again. And the brain adapts each time until we're successful. So making mistakes is actually really important for effective learning. So encourage that mindset in your children. You can remind them about how they learn to walk or how they learn to ride a bike. They won't remember learning to walk, but you can tell them how they fell over and stumbled and got up again and kept falling over and walked between the furniture, etc. And then also about riding a bike. Those things don't happen overnight. So children are naturally inclined to keep trying until they get it right. And somehow we lose that as we get older, and we feel that we should be able to do something first time without making any mistakes. And that's just a ridiculous idea. So help your children to get that feeling of making mistakes as part of the learning process. I think it's really important that parents become the model that they want their child to follow. So younger children particularly use mirror neurons in the brain to copy what they see others doing. So let them see you reading, let them see you struggling to work something out and sticking with it. Let them see you celebrate small successes, celebrating the effort that you've put into something. and let them see you make mistakes and then celebrate what you've learned from the mistakes. You really want your child to go to school with that growth mindset where they believe that they can learn and are more resilient in challenge. And if you can do that for your child and make that happen, then you've gone a long way towards helping them to be successful in school.
Parents play such a vital role in the life of young learners, and especially elementary year learners. The reason is that they're more connected to their parents, so they look up to them for a lot of support. And when we put them down that you can't do it, and then we start this, you need to unmute yourself, otherwise my voice will keep on repeating. People can hear it twice. Okay, so could you yeah, you just need to click that button, the mic button, and it will be unmuted. Can you do that?
No, I can't see a mic button.
Yeah, I have muted you. It's done. Okay, so what happened when we give this kind of cues to our learners that you are, inferior to that person, you cannot do it. So it stays with them for many, many years. When we think about girls, what do they believe? That we cannot learn mathematics. And it is a kind of stereotype that has been developed by us. That's the reason we have less number of girls in the field of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, as compared to boys, right? The girls, those who are very good at sports, they usually don't take it up as a career because they think that that is the career for males, right? So there is lot of the things that are going on which we sow the seed in their elementary years, and that is very wrong. As Liz said, that this is ridiculous to say that do not do any mistake. Sit in the class with pin drop silence. Do not talk to your peers. So these are the things which are usually considered as don'ts in our normal school setup, and these are the things which actually make the learning happen. Frankly speaking, if a person is doing a lecture, I'm saying the person is the teacher, for 40 minutes, students hardly take things for first 6 minutes or first 5 minutes, and then it all goes off. But if the same thing happened through collaboration, through experiential learning, learning by doing, observing things, touching things, as she said, that the five senses need to be on work so that we can send a signal over here. So it all happens by active learning, not by passive learning. So parents, you can also demonstrate that by stopping yourself for a while before correcting them. Let them, fall. Let them, go through failures, because that will make them more stronger. And this is what we want. No bone vita, no Horlicks can make them stronger if they don't have a stronger brain, right? So we are the people who are the key influencer in the role in the life of the students. And Liz, if you can little bit tell us about the Bobo doll experiment. I was reading about it, and it's all about role modeling. If a child is seeing you telling lie, if a child is seeing you doing wrong things, the child will ultimately do that. So there is an experiment which has been done. The experiment is, very famous for people like teachers, for people like us, like educators. They usually learn about it. So the experiment name is Bobo doll experiment. So as per that experiment, what happened? A child observed an adult beating or thrashing a doll, and the child repeated that. So what is this all about? What do they see? They observe, they do that, they replicate those things. So be very careful. Teachers are the role models, parents are the role models, they grow up seeing us. So we need to first correct ourselves. This is very important. And second thing, allow them to do mistakes. Joe Bowler is a very famous mathematician. She says that when we do mistakes, as Liz also said, it actually makes us stronger. So maths is a process, it is not a product focused subject. The more they do mistakes, the more they learn that okay, this is alternative way. Do not tell them this is the only way to solve the issues. So I spoke a lot about parents, but schools, the culture of the schools, teachers mindset also play an important role. So what are the advices that you have, Liz, for the elementary school so that they can support the elementary year school children in the right way, in the most appropriate way? Over to you, Liz.
Oh, there you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very well. You have unmuted yourself.
Good. Yeah, for me, metacognition is a really important part of this process. I run a training program for school staff to help them use activities based in metacognition to improve mental health and academic outcomes for learners, because students gain a greater self-belief from understanding how their brain works and how they personally approach learning opportunities. It gives them greater motivation, more resilience in the face of challenge. They gain a growth mindset and are able to take responsibility for their own learning. So just to break that down a bit, we discussed cognition last time in detail, all the different thought processes that are needed in order to gain knowledge and understanding. But if we put the word meta in front of that, it's a word that's used when something is paying attention to itself. So we end up with that rather simplified idea of metacognition being thinking about thinking. But it actually goes much deeper than that and includes the view that a learner has about themselves as a person and about their ability to learn. So it's as much about a child's internal relationship with learning as it is about what we're teaching them. And that makes it difficult for teachers because they're dealing with a whole class of children who all have a different kind of relationship with learning. There are some things we can do to make that easier, though. And it helps if students are aware of the difference between their conscious and their subconscious brain. I'm not going to get out my model brains. I have 2 model brains in the cupboard next to me, but I wanted to make this simple and easy for teachers to use. So I'm going to demonstrate it with a hand model that you can show very easily to students. All you have to do is get them to make a fist with one hand like that and a cup with the other hand like that, and place the one over the top of the other like that, and you have a model of the brain. And you have the 2 important parts that you want to talk to them about. The top part, which is the cortex, is the conscious part of the brain, and this bottom piece, which is the brainstem and the limbic system, is the subconscious part of the brain. So you can very easily divide that brain into the 2 parts that you want to talk to the children about, and they can make the model with their own hands. The conscious part thinks, but the unconscious part doesn't. This bit just stores information and bases decisions on the information that's in there. Our decisions, even as adults, are often based on something that's stored in there that we're even unaware of. And the subconscious is actually stronger. So any preconceived ideas that are stored in there, which we were saying often comes from that 7-year download that we mentioned earlier, they can act as a barrier to learning. So when a child feels a mental block of some kind, or some resistance to learning, or an emotional response to a difficulty, it helps them to know that this part of the brain, the subconscious, is affecting how they feel, and that by using this part of the brain, the conscious part, they can actually learn to choose to ignore it. So it helps if a teacher has a few things that will help them to kind of start changing those preconceived ideas. You've already mentioned the first one that I've got here, as and how the word can't. I do an activity with children here where I literally have the 4 letters C-A-N-T laid out in front of them. They lay them out. And then I get them to screw up the T and throw it in the bin. Now, I learned this from a neuroscientist that I worked with called Roy Padgett. The T bin was his idea. So I used to have a T bin in my classroom. If a child kept saying, I can't do this, I would make them do the word can't and then screw the T up and throw it in the bin. Now, there's still an issue because it's this part of the brain that has registered the can't. This part of the brain is saying it, but this is the part of the brain that's registering I can't, so you won't be able to do it. So we need to tell this part of the brain that we can. The problem is you've thrown the T away and you've now got the word can, but if you say I can do this, but you still feel like you can't do it, then there's still a problem. This part of the brain will still stop you doing it. So we need one extra thing. some people say that we should use the words "I can't do it yet," but the problem is you're still telling this part of the brain can't. So we want to get rid of that word completely. So to change that and to make this part of the brain believe that it can do something, this part of the brain needs to say, "I can do this, I just need some help." And then this part of the brain is ready to learn, and this part of the brain is ready to let you learn, because it believes that once you get that help, you'll be able to do it. So that's a really important statement to teach children how to say, "I can do this, I just need some help." A second way is to use the word fail, because we tend to see failure as a bad thing. Whereas I've seen this in classrooms where you can use the word fail as an acronym. So I get the children to write the letters downwards, FAIL downwards, and then add words onto each of them. And the words that you add on are first attempt in learning. So it makes a great acronym, because that suggests that if you're having a first attempt, that there's the opportunity for lots more attempts. It's just a first go at something. So they get the idea that they can have lots of attempts at something, and that each attempt will get them closer to the right answer. And that helps to develop reasoning skills. But it helps them put a positive spin on that idea of failing. They no longer think of it as a negative thing. Another thing that we need to do is to teach them the difference between the comfort zone and the challenging zone. The comfort zone is important. We all need one, because if we don't feel well, or we're feeling upset about something, we need to go into our comfort zone. But by the very nature of it, no learning takes place there. It's a safe place where nothing extra happens, so no learning happens. So we need to persuade children to push out of that comfort zone into the challenging zone, which is where learning actually happens. They need to be prepared to allow themselves to feel challenged, and that's a positive thing, and that they're about to learn something. So we need to help them get out of their comfort zone. And then another thing is the importance of practice. We said before that a lot of children seem to get into school with this idea that they should know things before they get there, and that they should be able to do everything first time. So we need to instill in them the idea of how important practice is. And a good way of doing that is to tell them a story about the jungle. Pretend that they're a scientist who's hacking their way through a jungle with a machete to create a path to lead to a long lost village that they want to study. They're climbing over things and crawling under things and swinging on things and hacking the jungle down. And they eventually find the village, but then they have to go back and get their friend to come and have a look. And that friend also needs a machete, and they hack their way through the jungle, swinging and climbing, etc. And then by the time they come back, there's a bit of a path there. And then they take the rest of the scientific team to start an archaeological dig in the middle of the jungle. And all those feet going backwards and forwards to this dig create a proper path through the jungle. So the newspapers and journalists start coming, and they create even more of a path. And then visitors start to come because they've read about it in the newspapers. And then eventually, because there's a great big wide path now through the jungle, I come along as an entrepreneur and I say, I'm going to lay some tarmac down on there, and then I can run a minibus and everybody can go and visit this dig. So that kind of illustrates quite nicely what's happening in the brain. That every time you repeat something, every time that same pathway is used, it becomes stronger and stronger and wider and wider. And eventually, as I said before, it lays down that coating of myelin, which is a bit like the tarmac, that makes it permanent. So that's a story that you can tell the children. They can even act it out. I've done this with children, and with smaller ones, you can actually have them acting out as jungle animals. You get lots of hissing and roaring and things, quite a fun thing to do. But I think it's important that we use those ideas of not using the word can't, of using the word fail as a positive first attempt in learning, coming out of the comfort zone into the challenging zone and allowing that to happen, and being prepared to practice. And I think those are the things that are really important to help children learn for themselves.
Thank you, Liz. That was really wonderful. because it is the school which again plays an important role in building the learning muscles of students and helping them to learn. Everyone can learn, but yes, we are, people who can help them out to learn better. So there's a question from the audience. I think he wants to ask that what percentage of brain do we use, this conscious and subconscious mind? If you can tell it in figures, if you know it, so do tell him if you have an idea
I,
about it.
I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's about, the conscious part is about 20% and the unconscious part is about 80%. It's much bigger and much stronger in capacity, and it's there all the time and holds every bit of information that's ever gone in through our senses. We're just unaware of it.
Thank you so much, Liz. Yeah. So I hope, Mr. Hussain, you got your answer from Liz. Okay, so we have discussed a lot about school, and this session is basically focusing on what are the best ways to learn. As we all know, that learning and teaching goes hand in hand. So there come the role of teachers. What should teachers be doing? What is the role of teachers in helping, with the development of early years, the brain development in early years, or developing the habits of mind which can help them to learn better? So I just basically want you to focus on learning, about learning. So how teachers can help them so that they can curb this thing, the way you said that you have given acronym to fail, the word fail, and that actually changed the meaning and sent a positive signal to brain. We used to do, tired words in the class. I used to keep a list of words which are tired words. We shouldn't be using it. And students used to, put those words that we won't be using it. Like, I can't do it, and some bad words which they used to have for their, peers. So that develop a culture that we need not to use it. So that, becomes a habit that we need not to use these words, so that actually develop a positive learning environment. Other than that, being leading an elementary school, it starts from the principle of the school. What type of environment you want to develop? First thing, you need to develop trust. You need to give voice, choice, and ownership to your teacher so that they can come back to you and they can discuss their mistakes and ask you the better ways to do it. And teachers can transfer the same thing to learners, that they feel, valued in the classroom. They feel that it is okay to do mistake, and they can feel that if I'm doing mistake, there is someone to help me, to come out of that zone. As Liz said, that there are, achievers in the classroom who stay all the time in their comfort zone, but they have a potential to learn better, but they don't do it because they stay there and there's no learning happening. They will stay there as if, they are the king on the throne. So what you need to do, you need to develop heterogeneous grouping in the classroom, where there is, conversation happening, so that the learners who are the strugglers and the learners who are the achievers can have constructive conversation. Grouping works really well. Developing growth mindset worked really well. The strategy that I shared, that worked well for me. Other than that, developing a positive collaborative environment also works well. The other day I was observing a class. There was a learner who never used to switch on the camera. Right, I was worried because when I observe class, the first thing I observe is whether learners are comfortable, connected with their peers, and then only they will learn. If they have a threatening environment, they will never learn. So I personally asked him, and the learner shared with me that I am a person from Bangla medium background, and I don't understand, most of the things which are shared by the teacher. He said it in Bangla, and then I told him I also don't know Bangla, and we both laughed. But I got to know the problem, and then we started giving him some handholding with the English thing, and now, we hope that he or she will be comfortable. I do not want to quote the name of the child. So this is how, we need to know the root cause as teachers, as parents, and as schools. So my second question I already asked you, Liz, that what is the role of the teachers to develop, better learning habits in the learners?
Yeah, we looked at some ideas last time, like you've already mentioned, this idea of creating a community of inquiry, working in groups, project work, maybe using philosophy. So if anyone wants to know more about that side of things, they can listen to the recording from last time. But what I want for teachers to do at the moment is to think slightly differently about your students. If you just for a moment think about the class of students in front of you, and then forget what they look like, forget what they're saying, forget what they're doing, forget that you've got all these school uniforms in front of you. Just take all that away and picture just a set of floating brains. Right, you've just got a class of brains there, nothing else. And that's to get the idea that you need to engage the brain. We're not engaging with the outside of the person. We're trying to reach a child's mind, not their external body. And it helps to really remember that by picturing their brain rather than that external way that they look. Another thing that teachers can do is allow for that difference we were talking about earlier, about those children are all going to have a different self-concept, and that will affect their relationship with learning. And Asna has already mentioned this idea of engaging as many of the senses as possible. The more senses that are involved, the stronger the memory trace will be that has been created. So if you provide more of the primary style opportunities, remember that primary idea of them being engaged and involved and using all 5 senses to learn from what's going on around them. They're learning from experience rather than being told. So that will help more. But if secondary learning opportunities are essential, which they often are because of the way that the education system is set up, just be aware that every child will be processing the learning differently. I love this quote from David Bowd. I'll read it to you. He says, "Those who plan to set up a learning situation, whether it be formal or informal, cannot presume that the experience which they hope to elicit will actually take place. The nature of the experience will be determined largely by what the learner brings to the situation." So we can plan all we like, but we do need to keep in mind what the learners are bringing with them and not just plough on ahead as if they don't matter. It's really important when you teach a new concept that you always link it explicitly to any previous learning. Do you remember we said earlier that the brain stores information with other information that's similar? So what you want to link it for the child so that their brain, when they hear this new information, that their brain will store it with old information already in their heads that is linked to it. And that's going to help their understanding and their recall later on because it's already been linked together in the brain. If they hear random bits of information, the brain just stores it anyhow, and they can have bits of information all over their head, but they won't remember it because it's not linked to anything else memorable. So do that for them and link everything together. Do it at the beginning of each lesson as well. Always link what they're going to learn this time to the previous lesson that they had. So you've got that constant linkage and chain of information that will all get stored together in the brain. The other thing that I think is really important is to put regular checks in place to make sure that everyone is still with you mentally. As Naha mentioned earlier on, that idea that sometimes they will sit there and they're completely switched off and in their comfort zone. So you need to check. Teachers often leave this until assessments or exams are due, and by then it's too late to discover that a student is struggling or doesn't understand the work. So you need to find out sooner than that. And I'll just mention 3 really quick ways of assessing the learning for the teacher that doesn't create a lot of work or a lot of time. One is mini whiteboards, one is traffic light cards, and the other one is keyword card shuffle. It's easy to provide each child with a mini whiteboard and pen, and at intervals you can ask a question. They write the answer on the board and hold it up facing you, and you can see straight away who's got it and who hasn't. There's rules attached to this. They don't look round at what other people have written, and you don't pass comment on anybody's answer, whether they've got it wrong or right. But you've got a guide, a very quick guide about who has got it. And what you can do is, if you see that there are several students who have not yet reached the right answer, you can have a class discussion emphasizing what it is you wanted them to learn, and then ask the same question again and get them to hold the board up again, and more of them should have the correct answer. And if some of them are still struggling, you can say things like, so what if I reminded you that, and then remind them of something, would you change your answer? And then get them to have another go. So it's really quick way of doing that and really effective. The second one, the traffic light cards, is where each student has 3 small cards, a green, a yellow and a red. And you can ask at intervals who feels confident to explain what they've just learned and see how many green cards get held up. Those who feel that they've got it but don't yet feel able to explain it can hold up a yellow one. And someone who thinks, no, I don't get it, can hold up a red card. But again, you don't make any comment about the children's responses. So you choose someone who's holding a green card to explain their understanding. And then if they miss something, you get someone else who's holding a green card and say, can anybody add to that? And gradually what will happen is some of those with a yellow card will change to a green one, or someone with a red card will change to a yellow one. And you can do that for as long as you need to. And then when you feel you've elicited the correct learning from the group, you can ask for another show of cards, and there should at least be more green and yellow ones and no red ones. And that's all of what we said before about creating that community where everyone takes part and no one's afraid to show that they're not sure about something, because everyone's helping everybody else get there in the end. It's seen as a community thing. And then lastly, the keyword shuffle is about having all the key words for a topic written out on a set of cards, and you pin those to a pin board as you use them in your teaching. And then at the end of the lesson, you remove the cards and invite a volunteer from the class to pin them back on the board again. But this time they have to do it as a flow chart to show the relationships between those words. And the volunteer can get help from the class. They can make suggestions for improvement or help them out if they get lost. So the class actually helps to create this flow chart. It might not work every lesson if you haven't got enough keywords, but certainly after 2 or 3 lessons, you can do that as an activity, and it helps everybody link information together. So I think that the last thing I would say on that one is that it's really important. We were talking about kind of changing mindsets and making children more teachable and making it easier for them to learn, is to praise effort. We've said how important that is. And some teachers praise the person who finishes first, or the person who does the neat work, or the person who hands something in. Those aren't the things to be praising. It's praise the effort that has gone in, so that you get that each child feels that the effort they're putting in is worth it, and that will help get them there in the end.
Thank you so much, Liz. You took me back to the classroom, and I was, recalling all the strategy that we used to have. The few strategies here I would like to share is blobs tree. Blobs tree is a tree-like, figure with many blob figures, and you can, informally use it. So where are you today? Are you on the stem, or you're hanging on the branch, or you are at the top of the tree or somewhere? So there are many blob figures. You can number them and you can use it. The very interesting one that I'm using with my teachers, that there are, cat faces with a level of learning, and they pick up that we are the number 1 cat because we are confused, or we are the number 2 cat, we are so scared today, we do not want to do it, or nervous about it. And the third that I recently used was a spinner. When we keep on talking for 40 minutes or 30 minutes or 20 minutes, in between, most of the learners, feel lost. So you can use a spinner, that is a digital spinner. You keep your children names handy on the spinner, and you just run that spinner. So they will all be alert that any time our chance can come, and we need to, pay attention. So this is a kind of provocation, a motivation for them to stay active. The thing that Liz recently shared, that praise the effort, is actually an experiment done by some of the work related to Carol Dweck. I do not remember the name of the scientist exactly, but the scientists actually tested it on 3 or 4 sets of students. The first one was not at all praised. The second one was praised, but that praise was basically, on the task. The third one was praised for efforts. And the third one, which was praised for efforts, performed eventually more better. So it's very important. If you're saying very good, excellent, after some time these words will lose their potency. They will not understand how good they are. If you will specifically you performed so well today and you did this and this. So make your feedback elaborative, specific, and then praise them. So, giving feedback is again an art, and your feedback should always have a feed forward. So, a child should not develop a kind of, the complacent behavior that I'm good at everything and now I need not to perform better. You need to pick up areas where a child can improve. And the third thing that I would like to say that Liz wrote a fabulous post on LinkedIn, and it was related to something of related to her work only. And if you remember, I posted a picture of learning pitch. Have it in the classroom and tell the students that it's okay to feel lost, it's okay to feel worried, it's okay to feel like as if I don't know something. This is the process you're going under the learning pit, and you will move towards the other side of the learning pit more resilient, more stronger, and more well informed. So you can even use a learning pit if you are a teacher of grade 3, 4, 5. So these are few of the strategy that I used personally for many, many years in my classroom. And believe me, these all work, but it depends. It depends on your school. It depends what type of issues you have with your learners, and you can use any of these strategies. Shared wonderful and very easy strategies, and believe me, those are not time consuming. You have your cards ready and you can start using it, and it will become a culture of your classroom. Your students will start sharing it. Now, I'm in the red zone, I'm in the green zone, and this will become a language, common language to discuss and understanding, right? So I have a very good question for you, Liz, and I don't think so we are in the right condition to answer this question. The person asked that her daughter has some kind of speaking difficulty and she's good at writing. She was born premature. So, what I suggest, consult a specialist. And if you really want to consult Liz, you can write to her, or you can just check lizkeable.com. She's there. Her contact number is there. You can discuss with her. I don't know whether she'll be able to help you out or not, but yes, she helps people. And if she has a SEN difficulty, then you need a person near to you who can diagnose what actually it is. Right? So it's very difficult to answer this question, but I tried it. Liz, last question for you is, we are discussing about schools, we are discussing about teachers, parents, everyone. But we did not discuss about the most important person, the learner, right? It is very important that we believe that our learners are active, they are not passive receivers, they are the active constructor of knowledge. What we end up doing, we tell them to remember things, we tell them to memorize things, and to some extent we didn't tell them to apply it. But when you go to the Bloom's taxonomy, you will see that we are still targeting to the bottom three parts. We need to strive towards creating, evaluating, and synthesizing, right? So how can we do it? Once we involve them in the learning process, that is very important. And if Liz is here with us, I would love to hear from her that what is the role of students in improving themselves as learners in their learning journey. Over to you, Liz.
Yeah, I'm not sure that my answer to this is quite what you're expecting, but I'll share the way I feel about that. It's a tricky one because for so many students, education feels like something that's being done to them, and that they have to go to school. They don't have a choice, so they turn up and kind of wait to be fed, as it were. So it's really important that firstly, they appreciate their own role in the learning process if they're going to engage in any meaningful way with the learning opportunities that they're being provided. And another really important thing is that need to have a positive self-concept. We've already mentioned they have to believe that they are capable of learning, and they have to believe that the amount of effort that they're prepared to put in will affect the results that they get. They need to feel responsible for their own learning and to take the initiative. Sometimes we said last time that employers and universities were complaining about children who are leaving school and not able to act on their own initiative because they've been spoon-fed all the time. So they need to learn in school, not to always wait for explicit instructions on everything. They need that growth mindset that we've been talking about. where they know they can improve and that they can have an impact on what they achieve. And a lot of that comes back to what I was saying earlier about metacognition, where a student has some recognition of self in the learning process. And that's what's missing for a lot of students. And that's why I make that the focus of my work nowadays. And unfortunately, everything that I've mentioned there needs to be taught. Very few young people actually have this as a natural part of themselves. Those that do well in school, it tends to be that they naturally have all these attitudes towards learning. But what we really need to teach, the fact that they have a role to play in their own learning. We need to teach them to have a positive self-concept, to believe that they're capable of learning. The effort makes the difference. What a growth mindset is, where you can make changes to the way that you think and that you can improve and grow, and that will impact on your achievement. And to recognize themselves as an important part of the learning. And as I say, that is all specifically for a lot of children actually needs to be taught by parents and teachers, because the school system tends not to focus on the individual student. And that's a bit short-sighted, because students are the most important factor in their own success. So that's probably not what you were looking for, but that's the way I feel, is that we have to teach them those skills, because for a lot of children it doesn't come naturally.
Thank you so much, Liz. And yes, I agree with you, completely agree with you, that these are the things, those are the dispositions or the skills which can be meticulously done in the classroom if we purposely plan for those things. Teachers need to find opportunities. Teachers need to understand the ZPD of each student. We are currently doing a PD on ZPD because I want teachers to understand the ZPD of each student, and apart from that, they need to understand that ZPD of each student, the zone of proximal development, is different in different subjects, and there may be different reasons. So if we really want to move them up in the ladder, we need to know where they are in their learning journey. This is there. And apart from that, the student need to consider that I am here and I am capable to move up in the ladder. These are the obstacles, and these obstacles can be solved with the help of that more knowledgeable other. So I'm trying these things over here, and it seems like it's working. And I will get back to you with more information on it. I keep on sharing things with you, and you keep on sharing things with us. So thank you so much, Liz. We learned a lot. We have amazing positive comments. I'll be mailing your certificate at the end of this week. I was too busy, actually, couldn't make it. And again, for you participants, your certificate link is ready. Liz, I can say this, but I don't want to disappoint you because you joined us in odd times. I was sharing with Liz that we may not have, more people this time because this is an odd time, but many of you joined us. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for asking those questions, which helped us to understand those queries. There are a few which we cannot answer. So you can touch base with Liz. Liz is very much active on LinkedIn, and Liz has her own website, lizkeable.com, her name with the .com, so you can easily find her on internet. Thank you so much, Liz. We were longing for these two sessions, and I must say you have shared your valuable insights, and there's a lot to learn from you. Amazing. Thank you so much, and I know how busy you are, but still you said yes and came over and discussed. We will continue future collaborations. And yes, thank you so much, participants. That's all for today. I'll meet you in the next session. So stay tuned in the WhatsApp group. Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much. Would you like to say something at the end?
Yes, just thank you very much for having me. It's as I've said before, it's my favourite subject. I'm happy to talk about it. My passion is the learner having the opportunity to reach their potential and have a successful life beyond education. That's what I'm concerned about.
Beautiful passion you have, and I'm wishing you all the best, that you keep growing that passion so that you can help more and more learners. And yes, we all here as educators should have this passion which Liz has. I have, to some extent. I want to improve educator, parents, learners, everyone, and I'm doing my bit to some extent. And yeah, efforts will be successful if the efforts are consistent and your intentions are positive. This is what we believe. Thank you so much, Liz, and it's wonderful having you. And participants, please fill that form to receive your certificates. There are many people who keep on, sending me messages that I did not receive. If you will not fill the form, you will not receive the certificate because it is auto generated. So fill that form quickly and you will receive the certificate for sure. Thank you, Liz. See you again. Bye bye. Just ending the broadcast.